Hello and welcome back to Do Theology. It is Friday, May 9th, 2025 as I record this. I thought it had been about 6 weeks since I last recorded an episode. Lo and behold, it's been over 2 months. Can you believe that? I couldn't, but I guess I have to because that's reality. I would like to say that I've been working on all kinds of Do Theology stuff that's going to come out and really just blow your mind, but that's not what's been happening. Instead, I've been just really busy with all kinds of other stuff, and for your sake, that's a bummer if you like Do Theology content. I'm sorry, but I am a pastor, and our local church has been growing, and it's been a lot more shepherding work than what I've been used to traditionally, and that's great. I've also been writing a book, and so maybe that's something you're interested in. I hope to publish it this winter. A Christian Theology of Conscience is the subject. There aren't very many books out there about conscience in the Christian world, and certainly no works that are accessible and modern that are a full treatment of our theology of conscience. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been writing a book on conscience, as comprehensive as possible. And like I said, I hope for it to come out in the winter. And it's a subject I'm really passionate about. I've been intrigued with conscience for a long time in my Christian life. And if you are a longtime listener of the Do Theology podcast, or if you are an avid listener and have kept up with Ken's Chartology episodes here on this channel, you know that we have this chart, this doctrines chart, and the third column on that chart is all about conscience. So I wanted to really dive in and explain a whole lot more about conscience and how we arrive at what we believe regarding matters of conscience or opinions or doubtful things in the Christian life. So that's what I've been doing. It's probably going to be somewhere around 70,000 words, so 250-ish pages, depending on formatting. This winter, I want to get it published this winter. I'm about 80% done with my first draft, so working on that. I've been working on that really hard for several weeks. But here I am today to talk to you about other stuff. Christian nationalism stuff. Oh, are we gluttons for punishment or what? Oh, man, Christian nationalism. Some of you may know, if this isn't your first time listening to me, that I have talked about Christian nationalism quite a bit in the past. Last year, I did a 4-ish part series on Christian nationalism, as well as a couple additional episodes later in the year where I talked about, I guess actually both of those were more reaction videos, one to Doug Wilson and one to Robert Rees, I can't remember his first name. But guys who are in the Christian nationalism world, I responded to them in some stuff they were saying, in addition to that longer series I did. And the interesting thing with Christian nationalism is that it's a moving target. And so even though, I talked about it quite a bit last year, it's changed a significant amount since last year. We are now in late spring of 2025 or mid-spring, and in the months that have not transgressed. Why do I say transgressed? Maybe it is transgressed. In the months that have passed since last summer, there have been developments in the Christian nationalism world that I want to talk about. This is another thing I guess I was working pretty hard on in the last couple of months, was kind of wrapping my mind around what's going on in the Christian nationalism world, because I was giving an updated presentation on these things just recently at a conference in Pennsylvania. So that was a great reason to dive in and see what's going on and do my best to conceptualize just exactly what is going on in the Christian nationalism world. And so what I'm going to present to you today is a development of my thoughts from last year that I think more accurately articulates what is happening now. It's not that what I did last year is irrelevant. It's still very relevant. In fact, it's foundational for a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. But things have evolved. It's just the way things go, especially movements like this that pop up. They evolve quickly. People break off from one another. They form little groups. Their little groups are echo chambers. Those echo chambers just grow and grow and grow into really nasty stuff, as we're going to see today. And so that's just what's been going on. All right. So I want to get into that here quickly because there's a lot of content. There is so much that I want to show you. If you are not watching on YouTube, I would recommend considering doing that at least, because I have visuals, several visuals from PowerPoint today from my presentation that are helpful to start wrapping your mind around what's happening. You know, last year when I was going through this stuff, I had people tell me, look, you're equating Christian nationalism with postmillennialism. And I said, yeah, kind of, because postmillennialism accounts for 90% of the fuel for this movement. And I stand by that. Okay, I still believe if you can refute postmillennialism, you will refute the Christian nationalism movement. I believe it. But because of some developments that have taken place, I think I can better articulate why there are non-postmillennials in the Christian nationalism movement, and that's what I want to talk about. All right, well, let's jump in, and let me remind you of my working definition of Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is an interpretation of the Great Commission that mandates believers to seek political power and governmental control in order to establish Christ's earthly kingdom here and now. I'm not showing you the presentations in like full screen presentation mode or the slides in full screen presentation mode. I'm showing them to you within PowerPoint where you can edit the slides, and that's why you'll see some red squigglies and stuff on the screen. I just have to mention that because if I were a viewer, that would annoy me. And as not a viewer, it annoys me. But there's my definition. It's an interpretation of the Great Commission that mandates believers to seek political power and governmental control in order to establish Christ's earthly kingdom here and now. Now let me show you a new graphic. Here's an umbrella, a very poorly drawn umbrella, but it is an umbrella. And you have Christian nationalism here as the overarching term, but within Christian nationalism, you've got other stuff going on. And that's what this circle that says post-mill is all about. See the post-mill circle there? Within the umbrella of Christian nationalism, you have post-millennialism. And that is critical to understand. It makes up a very big chunk of the people who are in Christian nationalism. They are influenced by postmillennialism by being postmillennialists themselves or being influenced by the application of postmillennialism, whatever the case may be. There they are. And just as a reminder, let me contrast for you pre-mill and post-mill. I have a slide that shows a-mill on here too, but then that's just too many arrows and too many words. So look, here's pre-mill and post-mill. In the pre-mill view, you've got the church age right now, the second coming happening, and then after that, a physical kingdom of Christ being established on the face of the earth. You can be historic pre-mill, you can be dispensational pre-mill like me, whatever the case may be. To boil it all down, that's what a pre-mill is. Christ is building his church right now. There's a second coming that happens before the physical kingdom. That's why they're called pre-millennial. Coming of Christ before the kingdom, the millennial kingdom. Then you have the post-mill view, which says you've got the church going on right now, but there's also a physical kingdom that is coming into existence right now. The church has been established since the New Testament times, though there's all kinds of stuff they would probably say to define that further or articulate it a little bit differently. But anyway, the church age is going on right now. Church is being built right now, but also the physical kingdom is being built right now, and Christ returns after the physical kingdom comes to full bloom on the face of the earth. That's why they're called post-mill. The coming is post the millennium, after the millennium. How is the physical kingdom going to be implemented? Well, many people believe through movements like Christian nationalism. You can implement Christian nations which will impose Christian principles and Christian laws that will establish Christ's physical kingdom here and now as a part of the Great Commission, gaining that political power, gaining that cultural influence, establishing the kingdom. And then once that is done, Christ will return and inherit the kingdom that we established for him. So as premillennialists like me, we are not looking to establish Christ's kingdom for him without him so that he can come back and inherit it. We are waiting for Christ to come back so that he can establish his kingdom and then we can inherit it. See, it's different, quite different. But what's going on is, back to our umbrella here, you've got postmillennialists and some non-postmillennialists, even premillennialists. It's not just postmill and amill in the Christian nationalism movement. You have postmill, amill, premill, you got everybody in there. And the question is, how is that possible? If we see Christian nationalism essentially just being a tool for establishing Christ's physical kingdom here and now before his return, how could an amill or a premill say, yeah, that's what we're supposed to be doing? Well, it's not so much theology that has convinced them, but it's methodology that has convinced them. Many people have been drawn in to the Christian nationalism movement, what is broadly termed the Christian nationalism movement, not by theology per se, but by methodology, not by doctrinal conviction or scriptural teaching per se, but by rhetoric online about how we should engage in politics. And a new type of Christian politics has been emerging. It's come out of the Christian nationalism movement, and it is now bringing people into the Christian nationalism movement because it's appealing to people beyond just postmillennialists. Okay, let me show you a little bit more what I mean. Back to our umbrella. I've taken away the handle. Now you just see the top part, the awning part. Christian nationalism. Within that camp, you've got postmillennialism fueling it. As I've said, 90% of the fuel comes from postmillennialism. But then now you see a different circle in there. You see a circle that says TradCon. That stands for Traditional Protestant Conservatism. For so long, you have postmillennialism being linked with traditional Protestant conservatism. You can think of men like James White, Doug Wilson, even Jeff Durbin. You could go down the R.C. Sproul road if you wanted to, because he was sometimes postmillennial. I think one of the things that he said about himself was that he kind of goes back and forth. He bounces between amill and postmill. Of course, now he's a dispensational premillennialist in heaven. But traditional conservatism. You have a lot of postmill guys, like the ones I just listed, who have taken a more traditional approach to politics. Traditional Protestant conservatism, and this will be defined momentarily. But what's important to note is that several, especially younger postmillennialists, have not only fueled the Christian nationalism movement, but this new type of politics labeled NCR here on the graphic. Getting away from traditional Protestant conservatism, they are seeking a new way of doing politics, and they're developing a new political strategy. It's been called the New Christian Right. That's why it says NCR there. It's also called the dissident right, and there are other terms that are used there for those people. The resurgent right, or yes, even the woke right. There are some people pushing that narrative, and the New Christian Right guys don't like to be called the woke right. But, there's a pretty strong case to be made that that's what's going on. So they've developed this new approach to politics called the New Christian Right, and non-postmill guys aren't exactly drawn to postmillennialism. They're not exactly drawn to Christian nationalism, but they see the New Christian Right and they say, oh, this is different. I like this. I like this methodology. This strategy is different. I want better things for my nation. I want better things for my family. I want to try something new and different because I'm tired of the same old with politics and the way that America has gone. So the New Christian Right comes along and says, we've got you covered. We've got a new way to go about all this. And they're drawn to that. And they end up basically being a part of the Christian nationalism movement because of this. So within the umbrella of Christian nationalism, you have traditional conservative guys like Doug Wilson, James White, etc. on one side, and they're beefing with the younger guys who have developed this New Christian Right movement. And the non-postmillennial peeps who have joined the Christian nationalism movement, by and large, are in that movement because they are attracted to the New Christian Right mentality and strategy. Okay, is that making sense? Well, I can't answer your questions on the fly because you are not in the room with me. But what I can do is say, let's explain it a little bit further. So you've got traditional Protestant conservatism on the one hand and the New Christian Right on the other. What is the difference? How have they changed the political strategy? What have they made different? Well, the traditional Protestant conservative approach has been to seek the advancement of the gospel by reasoning in the marketplace of ideas, while especially protecting traditional nuclear family values. You think back to the moral majority of the 1980s, those types of Christian political movements. Well, what have they sought to do? They've sought to reason with people and especially protect the family. Okay, focus on the family, that ministries like that. That's traditional Protestant conservatism in the political sphere. Well, the New Christian Right comes along and says, we're actually going to be different on that point. Instead of doing that, we're going to seek to restore Christian order to churches and society by defeating liberalism, not reasoning with those out there who call themselves liberal, but defeating them and enforcing Christian virtues through political power. That's what they're going to do. We're not out there to reason, we're out there to win. Okay? So Stephen Wolfe, for example, who wrote the book The Case for Christian Nationalism, who claims himself to be amillennial, though I am just very suspicious of how deep his convictions run in regard to eschatology. I don't think he's necessarily incredibly theologically convinced from the Bible that postmillennialism is wrong. But he could totally prove me wrong on that. That's neither here nor there. Stephen Wolfe is a New Christian Right guy and is one of the leading voices in the New Christian Right. And he looks at the traditional Protestant conservatism, and you know what he says? He says that's basically if Ronald Reagan was a Calvinist. That's what he's called it. It's kind of funny. If Ronald Reagan was a Calvinist, then he would just be, this traditional Protestant conservative, lightweight kind of guy when it comes to Christian political theory. But he is saying something different. He says we are looking to enforce Christian virtues and, as we'll see, even build a cultural Christianity. What else is different? Let's keep going. Traditional Protestant conservatism says that there are abstract ideals that should be valued, like equality and freedom for all. Those have been cemented in American thinking over the last 250 years, and those abstract ideals need to be really protected and valued. The New Christian Right, on the other hand, says tradition and heritage from the last 2,000 years of Christian history, that needs to be valued the most. Not so much these ideals that America was founded on, but our political theory should be driven by our church history, and the last 2,000 years of Christian history should be the number one consideration in how we do politics. Even going so far as to embrace older views of the relationship between church and state, Middle Ages type stuff. And we'll talk more about that as this goes on as well. Okay. Before we go to the next one and of how they're different, I should say that a lot of this compare and contrast stuff I got from John Harris over at the Conversations That Matter podcast, a guy who is pretty much associated with the New Christian Right, but maybe not so much anymore. I don't know. We'll have to see how that develops. He just spoke at the New Christian Right conference, the Defeating Trash World conference that Joel Webbin put on. John Harris was there, spoke at it. Whatever that means to you, that's just something that happened. All right, next thing. Traditional Protestant conservatism desires to be free of accusations like racism and sexism. They care about the labels that could be charged against them because of the priority of protecting the ideals of equality and freedom for all. And they use dignified speech when they engage with others and they try to reason with others. So if someone were to call a traditional Protestant conservative a racist, he would go as far as he could to prove that that was wrong and say, no, I'm not a racist. And here's why, The New Christian Right, on the other hand, they are unbothered by such accusations, as long as ordered affections and God's created order are upheld. They are generally open to kinism thinking and crudeness of speech. So now I need to back away from this little chart I've made and kind of play some clips and give you some quotes to explain what I mean. But to summarize or maybe not summarize, actually it's the opposite of summarize, to unpack that thought just a little bit more before we get to that. They don't care if they're called racist. That's really important to know. The new Christian right guys, they don't care. If they're called sexist, against misogynistic, against women, whatever, they don't care. If they're called racist against black people or anti-Semitic or whatever, they don't care. They just don't care. They say you can have ordered affections. You can love certain people more than others. You can recognize that certain people or groups are better than others, and that's all okay. So kinism is a word that comes up sometimes in these conversations, which is kind of just another word for racism. It's a little different, but not really. But let me just explain to you what I mean, all right, as we get into this. And this is where it's really important to recognize what we're doing here. I kind of hate the fact that I have to be talking about all this because this isn't theology. This isn't Bible stuff. This is just like an update on the world around us, the Christian world around us, and how certain movements are just denigrating and it's terrible. But at the same time, it very much touches on our theology, as evidenced by, Lord willing, if everything works out with when I release this, later this week, James White is going to be debating one of these Christian nationalist guys, even though they're both kind of in that under that umbrella of Christian nationalism. They're going to be debating each other on this topic. Can a black person be as sanctified by the Holy Spirit as a white person? I mean, it's stupid. It's ridiculous that we're debating this. But they have these ideas, people in the New Christian Right and beyond. I'll talk about beyond here momentarily. They have these ideas that are very absurd, anti-biblical, evil, but they're being put forth as the best and brightest of Christians today. And there are many people who are following these guys. And so it does touch on theology and it's gross stuff, and it all builds on each other, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. All right, so let me pull up now. Let me go to, where do I want to go? I want to go to X first, I guess. The artist formerly known as Twitter. And just so you know, I don't have a producer here. I don't have any kind of fancy stuff going on. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you're like, what on earth is happening? His screen is all weird looking. Well, I'm getting there. Okay, now we're there. Let me show you what I mean about not being afraid to be called racist, not being afraid to engage in kinism thinking and all of that. Joel Webbin here, he's defending one of his co-hosts named Wesley Todd. He says that his co-host's point on this issue that they were dealing with at this time, this was a little over a month ago, that Wesley's point is that in current times, racism has come to mean nothing more than preference. Preference for one group does not necessitate hatred or mistreatment of another. Therefore, today's racism is a fabricated, extra-biblical category and a made-up sin. No, that's interesting. Racism is just a made-up sin, he says. So, see what I mean? In the New Christian Right, they're not afraid to be charged as racist. Here's a 1-minute clip I want to show you from Joel Webbin. This was captured and shared by this person's name on X, who shares a lot of his stuff, does a lot of work of going through his material and sharing the most absurd stuff, and this is one of them, pretty absurd. And I want to go ahead and listen to this for a minute and then come back and talk about it. So here's Joel Webbin getting into that racism stuff and how he's just not afraid to engage with that label.
And yet this man also is in authority. He's groomed and trained from birth. He's prestigious. He's in a higher class of society. He's probably a higher giftedness and intellect than many others in that culture. And none of that is inherently sinful. Hierarchy is not a sin. Pride is a sin. Favoritism is not a sin. Animus is a sin. You can favor one without hating another. You can be above one without being arrogant toward him. We have to get rid of made-up sins, brothers and sisters. Well, this is a sin. Why? Is it lust? Is it murder? Is it theft? Is it pride? Like, those are sins. Right? Those are sins. So if you want to say, for instance, I'll just use the one, we're all thinking about it. I'll just go there. Why not? Racism.
Okay. So there he is. Initially, he's talking about, you've got someone in your life who should be leading, whether that's someone in your community, government-wise, or someone in your church or whatever. You should have preference for certain types of people and have even favoritism for certain types of people. And the way he presents it, it's almost like, okay, I can understand merit-based hiring or promotions or whatever. But you see what he's doing where he's following that line of thinking, and he goes as far as to say favoritism then is not a sin for certain types of people. And let's rethink racism. He's starting with a nugget of something that is true and acceptable, and then it expands and becomes something that you don't want to be around. And if you're looking for leading voices in the New Christian Right movement, you should look no further than Joel Webbin. Okay, New Christian Right, Joel Webbin, he is one of the top dogs out there for sure. He's got the big YouTube channel and podcast and all of that. And Stephen Wolfe as well. So speaking of more racism type stuff, Stephen Wolfe, here's something that he has said. I've now got to change this to this. All right, Stephen Wolfe, he says, while intermarriage, that is racial intermarrying, interracial marriages, while intermarriage is not itself wrong as an individual matter, groups have a collective duty to be separate and marry among themselves. Groups have a collective duty to be separate and marry among themselves. So if groups have a collective duty, if it's wrong for the whole to do it, then why is it not wrong for the parts to do it? It's either right or it's wrong. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to interracial marriage. And here he's saying it's both. It can be right on the individual level, but it's always wrong on the whole. What? And this is kind of what I run into a lot with Christian nationalism. You get a lot of guys who will say stuff like, it's not that every individual Christian is mandated to seek political power, but it would be wrong for the entirety of the church to avoid political power. Well, parts and wholes, I mean, the parts make up the whole, and the whole is made up of the parts. So how can you have these two different rules at these two different levels? Okay, well, that's something that they would benefit from explaining themselves a little bit further on that. Here's another thing he said when it comes to racism type stuff. Stephen Wolfe says, Black Americans, considered as a group, are more willing to conduct certain types of public disorder, violence, petty theft, vandalism, looting, rioting, etc., when constraints are reduced. For this reason, they serve as the anarchic element of anarcho-tyranny in the United States. Black Americans, they are more willing when the rules are taken away, laws are taken away, the enforcement of laws, when that's taken away, Black Americans as a group are more willing to conduct certain types of public disorder. Now, is that necessarily factually incorrect? When you look at statistics and stuff, is that factually incorrect? I don't think that's factually incorrect. But, because you look at statistics on crimes committed, percentage of crimes committed and percentage of population, blah, blah, blah. All right. But what's he doing? He is blaming their behavior on their kin or their skin color. There's a direct link that's being made between their activity and the pigment in their skin. Now, I know there have to be places where he's explained how culture, subcultures, play a huge part in this, right? We recognize that there's a problem in especially the Black community with fatherlessness and the type of media that they consume and give to their children that influences their children. all of these things that cause their children to grow up with distorted views of who they are supposed to be. We recognize that there's a subculture that exists, a hood culture, that affects lots and lots of black people who propagate that type of subculture. But there are white people, of course, involved in that too. There are Mexicans involved in that too, or just Hispanics, Latinos in general. There are all kinds of subcultures in all kinds of nations with all kinds of varying pigments. And the problem is the teaching that is infiltrating the homes of people, the children, the teaching that is affecting them and guiding them down wrong paths. What you find among New Christian Right type people is you find that they are linking that poor behavior, that poor thinking, with the skin color more and more often, without explaining the teaching that is undergirding all of it, without addressing the actual subcultures. So you get statements like, black Americans, well, they commit more crimes than white Americans. And linked with that, you get teaching like, white people should, they have a duty to just marry among themselves. So what are you doing? You're propagating a lot of racist thinking. That's what's happening. All right, well, there's actually another level to all of this beyond the New Christian Right. So you've got traditional Protestant conservatism that has existed within Christian nationalism, and you have the New Christian Right existing within the Christian nationalist movement. But you know what else you have? You have this group called Stone Choir that is led by one Corey Mahler. And he says stuff like this: anyone who thinks racism is a sin is not a Christian. Something to know about Corey Mahler is that, or Mahler, he is never to be outdone. We're looking at these quotes from Joel Webbin or from Stephen Wolfe, and you think, whoa, that's eyebrow raising. Your eyebrows will leave your face being raised so high when you see what Corey Mahler has to say. He's a Lutheran. He's been excommunicated from his particular denomination. He's single. He has no children. He is an attorney by practice. And so he is an interesting guy. He's the one that James White is going to debate this Friday. It's because of statements like this. Or how about this one? Corey Mahler says, no one has ever disliked blacks because of the color of their skin. It has always been the content of their character that has repulsed all civilized men. Okay. We are no longer talking about the problem of false teaching within subcultures and fatherlessness and breaking from the protection of the family as God has designed it and all of that. We're not talking about any of that. Now we're just talking about just straight up, this is just straight up racism, right? And he would own that. And he would say, look, racism is not a sin. So what's the problem? If you think racism is a sin, the problem's with you, not with me. And so you get this type of thinking going on within Christian nationalism now because that has infiltrated. It has totally infiltrated. Here's another thing that he has said. Let me go back to change this to this. Okay, look at this statement from Corey Mahler. I think he's deleted this tweet or post on X, so I couldn't find the actual post, but I have this logged. He, once upon a time, put out a post that said, blacks are not American. And then he imagines someone responding to him, but blacks have been in the U.S. for centuries. And his response, so have pigs, but that doesn't make them human. So he's mixing ideas here a little bit, I think. I don't think he's intending in this statement to say that blacks aren't human. But of course, he's trying to raise the eyebrows. He doesn't want to be outdone. And so he's making stronger and stronger statements that are evil. This is terribly evil. It goes against what we learn in Scripture about how every human being is made in the image of God, equal in worth and dignity and value. Every human being is a potential recipient of God's grace from our perspective and needs to be treated with dignity and love. We need to love our neighbors. He doesn't care about that stuff, right? Corey Mahler just straight up doesn't care. And so you have guys like James White who have been associated with the Christian nationalism movement. And it's their own fault. Postmillennialism has launched this whole movement a few years ago, especially with COVID and stuff, kicked this whole movement off, okay? And these guys who are more traditional conservatives, they're pretty sketched out. They're freaked out. They're saying, I don't want anything to do. I don't want to be lumped in the same group with Corey Mahler. You know, I mentioned James White and Mahler. They're debating this Friday about this really racist idea that Mahler has. And I said they are both in the Christian nationalism camp. And if James White were to hear this, he would just be so ready to rebuke me and say, do not associate me with that heretic, that son of the devil over there. And I would agree with James White that, yeah, Corey Mahler is a heretic, a son of the devil. And I would agree with James White's position in this debate. And I fully support James White in this debate. And I like James White a lot. But I have to say this. The minute you came out and started promoting the faulty theology of postmillennialism and started linking yourself with guys like Doug Wilson, you became part of this movement. And this movement has birthed other movements. So going back to my PowerPoint with the amazing graphics that I have, check this out. You have as the foundation, the base, plain old regular Christian nationalism. Oh, it's so funny. It's like, can we go back to the day when Christian nationalism was just postmillennialism? Those were the days. All right, so plain old Christian nationalism that was essentially postmillennialist thinking and seeking to, take over the world with political power, but in a way that was linked to traditional conservatism. They were not looking to run coups over governments. They weren't looking to kill black people and Jews. They were just Christian nationalists, postmillennialists living in America, having a good time. All right. Well, out of that movement, some people have come out of that movement and created this thing called the New Christian Right. And as they have done that, they've brought in people that weren't in the Christian nationalism movement beforehand. So you have a portion of those who were along for the ride at the beginning with Doug Wilson who have said, no, we need to go farther. And this would be people like in the Ogden group of Brian Sauvé and Eric Kahn and those types, even Joel Webbin and Wesley Todd as co-host, and on it goes. You have those guys who have come out of Christian nationalism, the original kind, Christian nationalism 1.0. They've come out of that and they've said, we have a better way to do politics called the New Christian Right. And they've attracted people who were never a part of Wilson's team to begin with because of this new political strategy. But now what we're seeing, as I just shared with you some quotes from Corey Mahler and gave you a little bit of his history and background, we've seen that out of the New Christian Right have come some people that have linked up with Corey Mahler. Did Corey Mahler come out of the New Christian Right? I don't think so. I don't know where he came from. He kind of feels like he came out of left field. He's a Lutheran after all. Where do those guys come from? They just come out of the woodwork. They all come from Minnesota and North Dakota. Well, Corey Mahler comes out with this podcast, Stone Choir, with his co-hosts and everything, and they have these even more extreme ideas. So New Christian Right was more extreme than plain Christian nationalism, and now Stone Choir is more extreme than the New Christian Right. And they're attracting people out of the New Christian Right to go even farther, and they're attracting people who never were in the movement to begin with, but are just super racist people who think that Christianity is just this Jew-hating, people-stomping religion, and so they like that, and they're joining. So it's actually gaining a whole bunch of fleshly-minded heretics. But it's growing. And so you can see on the graphic, you've got some going to one group, some coming out of that group, going to another. And the fear of the people at the bottom now, so James White, Doug Wilson, those guys, they haven't moved from the bottom. They're still plain old postmillennial Christian nationalism. They're fearing that the Stone Choir effect is just going to keep running down and then in turn pulling people out of their section, their movement, and bringing them into these more extreme versions of what they've been teaching. Now, if they were teaching good theology, James White, Doug Wilson, and the bunch, I would look at this and say, look, it's not their fault. that you have some people who are taking what is good and right and sound and twisting it and creating a really bad thing. But when the tree is bad, it's no wonder that the fruit are also bad. Postmillennialism is false. It is utterly false. It can be refuted swiftly with the Bible. I've done my best to talk through it in previous episodes, and perhaps I will in the future. It's a bad eschatology. It is not biblical. Therefore, it's no wonder that the fruit of this modern Christian nationalism movement that is fueled by postmillennialism, it's no wonder that the fruit of it all is rotten. There's a direct correlation. So, should I keep going or should I stop? We are 40 minutes in. 40 minutes in, and I have a lot more content. You know what? I think I'm going to do a part 1 and a part 2. A part 1 and a part 2. But here's what I'll leave you with as just a little gift. This isn't a gift. I mentioned in the last slide when I was comparing still traditional Protestant conservatism with the new Christian right, I mentioned that not only are they open to more racist type thinking, or they call it kinism, not only that, but they're more open to crudeness of speech, this new Christian right. Here's one example of their crudeness. At a recent conference somewhere with new Christian right people, it might have been the Trash World Conference, I don't know. Look at this flyer that was going around, this little postcard that was being used to advertise a new church plant. Is your home church too gay? It reads. And here's what it says underneath. Your current church not fighting trash world? Your elders paralyzed by the PWC? That stands for post-war consensus. We'll talk more about that next time. Instead of being isolated and impotent, unite! Come join a Reformed church here in Temple, Texas, and advance Christendom. As a bellwether for the entire state of Texas, Temple and the I-35 corridor is the vanguard for this battle for the soul of the nation. We are confessional, post-mill, theonomic, Kuyperian, and fueled by both righteous indignation and holy purpose. Okay, freak shows. Wow. This is their version of evangelism. Instead of actually going out and engaging with the lost and practicing personal evangelism, they're just going to steal sheep. And while they do it, they're going to call your church too gay. Okay, well, next time we'll continue this comparison between traditional Protestant conservatism within the Christian nationalist camp and the new Christian right, while looking also at what Stone Choir has to say about stuff, that Stone Choir movement. Oh my word, what a crazy, crazy bunch. My hope is that this helps you as you deal with these things in your context. You might be seeing some of this in your own local church. You might be dealing with family members or friends who are going into these movements. Well, here you go. Here's more information as I see it, as I'm trying to conceptualize what on earth is happening. I'm doing my best to say this is what's going on and to equip you to have those conversations, okay? Well, I'll talk to you again soon. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Do Theology podcast.